Could Knuckle defeat Meruem? Knuckle is of course one of the very few characters in Hunter x Hunter with a Nen ability that could technically bring down the Ant King. I'm not saying that it's at all likely, but I want to know if it's possible. And this matchup is sponsored by Squarespace, the platform that provides you with the tools to create your own custom websites and online stores to engage with your audience on your terms. But more about them later. And Knuckle is a very fun candidate to analyze, because his Nen ability, despite it being quite complex, is actually very straightforward and completely unambiguous because it's all maths, as opposed to other potential Meruem killers like say Finks, whose Ripper Cyclotron could, maybe technically, if given enough time, produce enough power to kill Meruem. But the problem is we have no way of measuring that power, and therefore no way of knowing how many times it is that Finks would need to rotate his arm to charge it, and therefore how long it would take to do all of the rotations. With Knuckle, however, we can calculate his ability to defeat Meruem right down to the second. So we're going to ask, what is Knuckle's Nen ability, Hakaware? How much aura does Meruem have? And how long would it take for Knuckle to bankrupt the Ant King? Let's begin. Knuckle is a very simple boy in Hunter x Hunter. He's a natural emitter with one Hatsu called Hakaware, which has one known function, being Bankruptcy Chapter 7. Here, Knuckle loans a portion of his aura, usually delivered via a Violence and Punch, consisting of anywhere between 200 to 300 units of aura which the opponent is then free to use however they'd like. Yes, this Hatsu actually makes the opponent stronger. However, there is a however. At some stage during the fight, the opponent must pay back the aura loaned, which by itself isn't too difficult of a task. However, every 10 seconds, the loaned aura accrues interest at a rate of 10%, rapidly making the aura repayment amount bigger and bigger, all of which is kept track of by this delightsome little mascot called APR, which stands for Amortizing Power Redirector. Knuckle has effectively weaponized the concept of compound interest, but the intention is that the number grows out of control so quickly that the opponent becomes physically incapable of repaying it, thus defaulting on their debt and going bankrupt. And once bankrupt, APR transforms into IRS, the individual Ren suppressor, and forces the user into a state of Zetsu for 30 days, making them completely Nen-nude. No aura control, no abilities able to be used, and just leaving them very, very vulnerable. And Hakaware has no maximum debt limit. So there is no creature on this planet, or whatever the Hunter x Hunter world is, no creature on that can outdo Hakaware in a strict battle of attrition, and that includes Meruem. There are some caveats though. For interest to accrue, Knuckle must be within 50 meters of his opponent, which is confusing because Hunter x Hunter itself is very inconsistent about this. In chapter 235, the radius was initially stated to be 100 meters, but then in chapter 308, it appears to be retconned to 50 meters. On the bright side, neither Knuckle nor the opponent are able to physically hurt each other whilst Hakaware is active. All of the punch fighting back and forth just equates to loaning more aura and repaying aura. However, the ability will cease as soon as the loan repayment is made in full to Knuckle. AKA, if Knuckle was to punch you with 200 units of aura, and then you immediately smacked him back with a 200 aura punch, then you've paid him back and Hakaware deactivates. But obviously that becomes much more difficult if you're unable to hit Knuckle within even a minute of the ability activating, because again, interest accrues every 10 seconds. So now all we need to figure out is how many units of aura Meruem has, and we have our answer. That's much less simple though. We need to start with Meruem's royal guard Yuppie. It's very commonly stated on the internet that Yuppie has an approximate aura quantity of 700,000 units. And this is because Knuckle himself stated that Yuppie's aura could be about 10 times that of Moral, who had 70,000 units. I want to stress that this is far from an exact measurement though. In the manga, Knuckle manages to sucker punch Yuppie, activate Hakaware, and then Knuckle simply says, "I can't see the limit of his aura." And then the narrator went on to describe Knuckle as a veteran over 5,000 battles. Knuckle was able to quantify his opponent's power based on past experiences and instinct. And coming across a foe with unprecedented powers was not even a rare event. But Yuppie was a monster with such a titanic amount of aura that he was on an entirely different scale than even the most powerful opponents Knuckle had ever fought. So here's a common misconception. Knuckle's Hatsu doesn't give him the ability to strictly quantify aura. That's just an extra sense that he sort of developed as a result of using this ability in over 5,000 battles. Which is that it's a lot of battles, by the way. Knuckle isn't all that old, maybe mid to late 20s, and to have already fought 5,000 battles is something like a fight every 2 days since he was born. But the aura quantification is something that Knuckle has developed as a vague instinct. It's not a precise number, and because Knuckle had never faced an opponent on Yuppie's level before, Knuckle was left completely in the dark. Like trying to measure the length of a city when all you have is one of those wooden 30 centimeter rulers from primary school. So Knuckle is forced to make a guess. He initially posits that Youpi's aura is 5 times more than Morrel, but then corrects himself to 10 times, but also ominously adds, more? He has no idea. However, for the sake of coming up with a practical plan, Knuckle decides to use the 10 times number and calculate how long it would take for Youpi to go bankrupt. And I'd say it wasn't all that bad a guess, considering that later on during the palace invasion, the narrator blatantly states that Youpi has less than 500,000 aura units remaining. The problem being, we don't know how much aura Youpi spent before that point. Given his tremendously overwhelming abilities, it was likely quite a bit. And he would continue to spend big, because the final number we see on APR for Youpi is 370,684, which was displayed less than 5 seconds before Youpi was set to go bankrupt. So according to that really helpful clock that pops up all over the palace invasion, according to that, Youpi spent about 100,000 aura in the space of about 3.5 minutes. So if Youpi was forced to go through the energy rating system, then he would get 0, probably even minus stars. But with that in mind, I think that 700,000 units of aura might even be conservative for Youpi. He could even be approaching the million mark. But fair play to Knuckle because he was in the right general range of unattainability. But then we have Meruem. And look, Knuckle can feasibly hit Meruem the same way he did with Youpi, via collaborating with Meliaron and his perfect plan Hatsu, which makes them both nice and seemingly non-existent. But in the same way that Youpi was completely off the scale for the most above average of human Nen users, Meruem is completely off the scale for the Royal Guards. The only way that Meruem could possibly make his presence more dominant would be with the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Through Squarespace, you can sell anything through an exceptionally easy to set up online store, be it physical, digital, or service products. In my case, I sell physical shirts, and mate, you would be surprised just how much of a pain doing something as simple as that can be. Which is why I genuinely use and love Squarespace, because they make it mercifully simple, yet somehow still really good. Squarespace offers an incredible amount of ready-to-go website templates that are customizable to your heart's content through the Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design system to further unlock and cultivate your creativity. So you can and should check out Squarespace through my link in the description, which will save you 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And thank you so much again to Squarespace, because it's sponsors like this that make producing our fictional hunter content possible on a regular basis, so please do check them out. But for now, it's back to you, me. So if we go with Knuckles' original scale, which again turned out to be somewhat accurate-ish, you might be able to assume that Meruem's aura is conservatively 10 times that of Youpi. So if we wanted to use the popular Knuckle calculation, then we're looking at least 7 million units of aura. Honestly, it could be a lot more, but I'm gonna use this conservative number to demonstrate just how absurd the situation is. So let's say that Knuckle lands a really hard punch. We're talking like 300 units of aura, that kind of punch. With that and that alone, at that rate, it would take almost 17 minutes for Meruem to go bankrupt. But look, Knuckle, he's a very resourceful boy. For example, in the fight against Gon, he actually loaned Gon some more aura. What a generous guy. Which took Gon's debt to just over 500 aura. So let's use that. Let's say he's able to land 2 punches on Meruem, these punches totaling 500 aura. If that was to be the case, then that would cut Knuckles' overall time by not even a single minute. With 500 units of aura compounding by 10% interest every 10 seconds, Meruem would go bankrupt at 16 minutes on the dot. Which I bring up because look, you can definitely see Knuckle being able to hit Meruem once. So long as he and Meliaron are using God's Accomplice, that is. But it's very, very difficult to see Knuckle being able to hit Meruem a second time. And what's worse is that the reward for hitting him a second time is almost meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Because remember that Knuckle needs to stay within 50 meters of Meruem for 16 whole minutes. And also remember that in the final clash of Netero versus Meruem, they exchanged over 1,000 blows in less than a minute. It was a rough ask for even Isaac Netero to survive 16 minutes with Meruem. In fact, their whole fight was probably less than that. So you know what, we need to be super generous here. If Knuckle's gonna have any chance, that's just what we are going to have to do. Let's say that Knuckle has a plan, like a really good plan, and he gets in a flurry of hits. They're not going to be as powerful as one concentrated hit, but each punch has say 250 units of aura backing it, and maybe Knuckle is good enough to hit Meruem 10 times. So that's an initial investment of 2,500 units that Meruem needs to repay. And in this absolutely outrageously lucky case, to start with such a huge advantage, it would still take just over 13 minutes to bankrupt Meruem. That's the thing about compound interest. With the principal amount, it can often feel like it's doing nothing at all for years and years on end. Then it just hits a point where it quite rapidly snowballs. It's all about patience, and that's not something we can really afford with Meruem, because at this point, even doing the impossible has only managed to shave 3 minutes off an almost 17-minute battle against a god. So it's looking pretty bad, but we do still have one option. Let's take Knuckles' absolute best case scenario, because the Ant King Meruem, he's always down for a game. So if Knuckles strolls in and says, "Yo, Ant Bro, let me hit you with 100% of my aura, it'll be fun," Meruem would likely respond with, "Sure thing, mate." So is Knuckles' maximum amount of aura enough to bring down Meruem as quickly as we need to be? Well, weirdly, Knuckles never revealed how much aura he has. He's very good at exposing everyone else whilst keeping his own secrets. But in theory, he doesn't need all that much. Hakawara is a very low aura Hatsu, and other than that, all Knuckle really uses aura for is basic enhancement, as well as the basic and advanced principles of Nen. Knuckles' max aura output probably isn't all that much higher than Gon's, which is 21,500. When it comes to the hand-to-hand enhancer style fighting, they were pretty evenly matched, which is great for Knuckle. He's not an enhancer. He's a natural emitter. So to think he could take on a natural enhancer in pure hand-to-hand Nen combat speaks to both his experience and his quantities of aura. Gon himself even knew that he would be at a disadvantage if he fought Knuckle in a battle of attrition, and that's why Gon was always dipping into his Dojunken series. He couldn't beat Knuckles straight up, so his only option was to try and create an opening for one big ol' punch. Whatever the case, Knuckle was a clear step above Gon in terms of aura quantity. I'd put him anywhere between 30 to 40,000 units, just due to how comfortable he was keeping pace with Gon, and keeping in mind that there's definitely a big gap between Knuckle and Moral as well. For the sake of argument, let's be generous. We're going to go on the upper end. Let's say that Knuckle has a maximum aura output of 40,000 units, and that Meruem agrees to let Knuckle hit him with all 40,000 units. Surely, with that much debt, Meruem would have but seconds to pay it off before going bankrupt and losing Nen himself. Well, again, prepare to be very disappointed by maths, because with a very generously estimated maximum potential of Knuckles' full power, Meruem would go bankrupt in about 8.5 minutes. And against Meruem, that may as well be 16 minutes, it may as well be an hour, it may as well be a day. The only way for this to work would be to somehow invest an amount of aura that would send Meruem bankrupt faster than Melioron's perfect plan deactivates, aka before Melioron needs to breathe. Which actually, the dude can hold his breath for a pretty long time, a maximum of 2 minutes. So with that in mind, how much aura would we need to make Meruem go bankrupt in 2 minutes? Well, in order to accomplish this with perfect plan, you would need to hit Meruem with an initial investment of just over 3 million units of aura, which is the equivalent of 139 full power Gons striking Meruem with 100% of everything they have simultaneously. Now let's say we find a way for that impossible situation to occur. Meruem is bankrupt within 2 minutes. Knuckle comes out. He says, "Haha, you fell for the thing I did." Even after all of that, does it even matter? One of the most terrifying things about Meruem is that despite being the most powerful living thing in a world full of Nen users, he himself barely uses Nen at all. In fact, almost every application we saw of Nen from Meruem had nothing to do with offensive abilities. We saw him use Gyo, which he could do from birth. We also saw him use N to a degree that I don't think any living thing will ever match. And he did also use Ren, but that's more of a psychological attack, a violent projection of aura like a big old Nen peacock. And with aura synthesis, he does have the ability to devour the aura and even Nen ability of others, which only enhanced his reserves further and did show us an extremely rare case of Meruem using aura offensively when he fired one of Youpi's Rage Blasts into a mountain range and wiped it out with a single casual hit. I know this seems absurd, but I say all of this just to point out that Meruem doesn't even really use the power system that he was born into as an effective god. Even against Netero, you could make the argument that Meruem never went beyond the very basic principles. He really only used Ten and Ren. So what I'm getting at is that even if Knuckle manages to reduce Meruem to a state of Zetsu, even then, I think that Meruem is so naturally strong and fast that Knuckle still wouldn't be able to beat him. And that's after we've stacked miracle on miracle to get Knuckle to this point. So could Knuckle beat Meruem? Maybe, but he would need to hit the Ant King with an aura investment totaling almost 4 whole Royal Guards, and that's at the conservative end. So we'll change that maybe to a no. He just isn't capable of generating the principal amount necessary. But you let me know in the comments, who do you think has a better chance of beating Meruem than Knuckle?